This episode is going to be quite long, and I'm going to be reading from a Hamiltonian reader of Julius Caesar's Gallic War. The Hamiltonian readers, I'm a bit dubious about them, quite frankly. What they do is they change the order of the Latin to match more or less the sentence structure of English, and then use this as a means to get you into the language quite quickly. I think they have some use as long as you leave them quite quickly and go to the original text with the original word order. But it's useful to get a quick overview, I suppose. So what I'm going to be doing is reading it phrase by phrase in Latin with the English translation, so you can get an idea of what's going on and build up some vocabulary relatively painlessly. Primus liber, first book. Now, if this was Latin, you'd say liber primus. Commentariorum, of commentaries. Gai Julii Caesaris, of Gaius Julius Caesar, de, concerning. Bello Gallico. Here it says Gallico Bello, Gallic War, but a Roman wouldn't say that. He would say Bello Gallico. So as I said, you can see the problems already, that the order of the Latin is not natural. Omnis Gallia est divisa, all Gaul is divided, in tres partes, into three parts, unam, quarum Belgae incolunt, one of which the Belgae inhabit, aliam Aquitani, another the Aquitani, tertiam, the third, qui lingua ipsorum appellantur Celtae, which in the language of themselves are called Celtae, nostra Galli, in ours Gauls. Omnes he differunt, all these differ, inter se, between themselves, lingua, in language, institutis, institutions, legibus, in laws. Flumen Garrumna dividit Gallos, the Garonne river divides the Gauls, ab Aquitanis, from the Aquitani, Matrona et Sequana, the Marne and the Seine, are Belgis, from the Belgae. Belgae sunt fortissimi, the Belgians are the bravest, omnium horum, of all these. Propteria quod, because that, absunt longissime, they are distant furthest a cultu atque manitate, from the cultivation and the refinement, provinciae, of the province. Quae mercatores minime saepe comeant, and merchants least often resort ad eas, to them, atque important ea, and import those, that's those things, quae pertinent ad animos effeminandos, which appertain to the minds being made womanly. Sunt proximi Germanis, they are nearest to the Germans, qui incolunt trans Rhenum, who inhabit beyond the Rhine. Cum quibus gerunt bellum continenter, with whom they carry on war continually, de qua causa, from which cause Helveti quoque praecedunt, the Helveti also excel, reliquos Gallos, the remaining or the other Gauls, virtute, in valor, quod contendunt cum Germanis, because they fight with the Germans, quotidianis, praelis, in daily battles, ferre, almost every day, cum aut prohibent eos suis finibus, whether either they prohibit them from entering their own borders, aut ipsi gerunt bellum, or they themselves carry on war in finibus eorum, in their borders. Una pars eorum, one part of them, quam dictumst Gallos obtinere, which has been said the Gauls to hold, capit initium a flumine Rhodanum, takes the beginning from the river Rhone, continentur flumine Garumna, bounded by the river Garonne, Oceano, by the ocean, finibus Belgarum, by the borders of the Belgae. etiam attingunt flumen Rhenum, and it also touches the river Rhine, Sequanis, from the Sequanis, et Helvetis, and the Helveti. Vergit ad septentriones. It inclines to the 7 stars, that's the north. Belgae oriuntur ab extremis finibus Gallia. The Belgians rise from the furthest borders of Gaul, pertinent ad inferiorem partem fluminis Rheni. They reach the lower part of the river Rhine, spectant in septentriones, they look to the north, et orientem solem, and the rising sun. Aquitania pertinet, the Aquitaine reaches a flumine Garumna, from the river Garonne, ad Pyreneos montes, to the Pyrenean mountains, et eam partem oceani, and that part of the ocean, quae spectat ad Hispaniam, which looks towards Spain, inter occasum solis et septentriones, between the going down of the sun and the north. Orgetorix. Fuit longe nobilissimus et ditissimus apud Helvetius. Orgetorix was by far the most noble and richest among the Helveti. Is Marco Messala et Marco Pisone consulibus. He, Marcus Messala and Marcus Piso, being consuls. Inductus cupiditate regni, induced by desire of the kingdom, fecit conjurationem nobilitatis. He made a conspiracy of the nobility, et persuasit civitati, and persuaded to the state, ut exirent de suis finibus, that they should leave their borders, cum omnibus copiis, with all their army, esse per facile, to be very easy, cum praestarent omnibus virtute, when they did excel to everything in valor, potiri imperio totius Galliae, to gain the empire of the whole of Gaul. Persuasit, he persuaded, id that eis hoc facilius, to them, by this more easily, quod Helveti continentur, because the Helveti are hemmed in, undique natura loci, on every side by the nature of the place. Ex una parte, out of one part, latissimo atque altissimo flumen Rhenno, by the widest, and the deepest river Rhine, qui dividit Helvetium agrum a Germanis, which divides the Helvetian land from the Germans. Ex altera parte, out of the other part, altissimum Jura, by the highest mountain Jura, qui est inter Sequanos et Helvetius, which is between the Sequani and the Helveti. Tertia, the third, Lacu Lemannos, Lacu Lemanno, the lake Lemanus, et flumine Rodano, and by the river Rhone, qui dividit nostram provinciam ab Helvetis, which divides our province from the Helvetians. Fiebat his rebus, it was made by these things. Ut et vagarentur, minis late, both they did move around less widely, et possint minus facile, and were able less easily in ferre bellum finitimis, to bring war to the borders. De qua causa, from which reason, homines cupidi bellandi, men desirous of war, afficia bantur magno dolore, were affected with great pain. Autem, but arbitrabantur, seabere angustos fines. They deemed themselves, they thought they had narrow borders. Pro multitudine hominum, because of the large number of people. E pro gloria belli, and for the glory of war, atque fortitudinis, and of bravery. Qui patebant ducenta et quadraginta milia passum in longitudinem, which did lie open for 240,000 paces in length. Centum et octoginta in latitudinem, 180 in width. Ad ductis rebus, induced by these things, et promotio traitate orgetorigis, and excited by the authority of Orgetorix, constituerunt comparare ea. They determined to prepare those things quae pertinerent ad proficiscendum, which did pertain, which had to do with setting out. Coemre quam maximum numerum iumentorum, to buy as great number possible of beasts of burden, et carrorum, et the wagons, facere quam maximas sementes, to make as great possible sowing of seeds, ut copia frumenti suppetret in itinere, that plenty of corn might supply in the journey. Confirmare pacem et amicitiam cum proximis civitatibus, to confirm peace and friendship with the neighboring states. Duxerunt biennium esse satisibi ad eas res conficiendas. They thought that 2 years would be enough for themselves to those things to be accomplished. Confirmant legge, they confirm by law. Profectione in tertium annum, their departure to be in the 3rd year. Orgetorix delicitur ad eas res conficiendas. Orgetorix is chosen for those things to be accomplished. Is suscepit sibi legationem ad civitates. He undertook to himself an embassy to the states. In eotinere persuadet Castico. In that journey he persuades Casticus, filio Catamantelidis, the son of Catamanteles, sequano, a Sequanian, pater quius obtinurat regnum in sequanis multos annos, the father of whom had held the kingdom in the Sequani many years, et appellatus erat amicus, and had been called friend a senatu que populo que Romano populo, by the Senate and the Roman people, et ut occuparet regnum in sua civitate, that he should occupy the kingdom in his own state, quod pater ante habuerat, which his father before had, que item persuadet Aeduo Dumnorigi, and likewise he persuades the Aeduan Dumnorix, fratri Divitiaci, the brother of Divitiacus, quo eo tempore obtinebat principatum in sua civitate, who in that time did hold sovereignty in his state. Ac erat maxima acceptus, and it was chiefly acceptable plebi to the common people, ut conaretur idem, that he should attempt the same thing, quae dat suam filiam in matrimonium ei, and gives his daughter into marriage to him. Probat illis esse per facile factu, he proves them to be very easy to be done, perficere conata, to effect the things attempted, propteria quod ipse esset obtenturus imperium suae civitatis, because he himself was about to obtain the empire of his own state. Esse non dubium quin Helveti possent, to be not doubtful but that the Helvetians were able, plurimum totius Gallii, most of all Gaul, confirmat se conciliaturum regna, he affirms himself about to procure the kingdoms, illis, for them, suis copies, with his stores, que suo exercitu, and with his army. Adducti hac oratione, induced by this speech, dant inter se fidem et jus jurandum. They give between themselves faith and oath. Et regno occupato, and the kingdom being occupied, per tres potentissimos ac firmissimos populos, by the 3 most powerful and most firm people, sperant sese posse potiri, they hope themselves to be able to possess totius Gallii, of all Gaul. Ut res enuntiates Helvetis per indicium, when that thing was declared to the Helveti by spy, suis moribus coegerunt, by their customs they forced Orgetorigim dicere causam ex vinculis, to plead his case in law from chains. Opertebat poenam sequi damnatum. It did behove punishment to follow condemned. Ut cremaretur igni, that he should be burnt with fire. De constituta dictionis causae, in the day appointed of saying the cause. Orgetorix coegit omnem suam familiam, Orgetorix collected all his household ad decim milia hominum, up to 10,000 men, ad judicium, to the judgment, the place of trial. Et conduxit eodem omnes suos clientes, and also called together all his clients, que obaeratos, and all of those who were in debt to him, quorum habebat magnum numerum, of whom he had a great number. Per eos, by them, ripuit se, he rescued himself, ne diceret causam, that he might not answer the case. Cum civitas, when the state incitata ob amrem, excited on account of this thing, conaretur exequi sum ius armis, did endeavour to execute its right by arms, que magistratus cogerent, and the magistrates did collect multitudinem hominum ex agris, a multitude of men from the fields. Orgetorix mortus est, Orgetorix died. Neque suspicium est, nor suspicion is absent. Ut Helveti arbitrantur, as the Helvetians think, quin ipse consciberit mortem sibi, but that he committed death to himself. Nihil hominus, nevertheless, post mortem eius, after death of him, Helveti conantur facerit, the Helveti endeavoured to do that quod constituerant, which they had determined, ut exiant es suis finibus, that they may go out from their borders. Ubi iam arbitrati sunt separatos esse ad amrem, when now they deemed themselves to be ready for that thing, incendunt omnia oppida, they burned all their towns, ad duodecim numero, to 12 in number, vicos ad quadringentos, the streets, that's the villages, to the number 400, reliqua privata edificia, all the remaining private dwellings, compurunt omne frumentum, they burnt up all of the wheat, praeter quod erant portaturi cum se, except that which they were about to carry with them. Ut spare reditionis domum sublata, that the hope of return home being taken away, essent paratiores ad omnia pericula subiunda, they would be more ready to all danger to be undergone. Jubent quemque a fredomo sibi molita cibaria trium mensium, and they order each to bring from home for himself ground provisions 3 months' worth. Persuadent rauracis, they persuade the rauraci, et tulingis, and the tulingi, et latobricis, and the latobrigi, finitimis, neighbouring nations, uti ussi eodem consilio, that having used with the same counsel, suis oppidisque vicis exustis, their towns and villages being burnt up, profiscantur una cum is, they depart together with them, que adsciscunt socios sibi, and take up to allies to themselves boios, the boi, qui incolurant trans Rhenum, who had lived beyond the Rhine, et transierant in Noricum agro, and had passed over into the Noricum land, que oppugnarunt Noricam, and had assaulted Norica, receptos ad se, received to themselves. Errant omnino duitinera, they were in all 2 journeys, quibus itineribus possint exire domo, by which roads they were able to go out from home. Unum per sequenos angustum et difficile, one through the sequeni, narrow and difficult, inter montem Juram, between the mountain Jura, et flumen Rodanum, and the river Rhone, quo singuli carri vixtu carrentur, which by single wagons scarcely could be led. Autem altissimus mons impendebat. Also the highest mountain did hang over, ut per pauci facile possin prohibere, and very few easily would be able to stop their passage. Alterum per nostram provinciam, the other through our province, multo facilius, much more easy, atque expeditius, and more ready, propteria quod inter fines Helvetiorum, because that between the borders of the Helveti et Allobrogum and the Allobroges, qui nuper pecatierant, who lately had been reduced to peace, Rodonus fluit, the Rhone flows, qui is non nullis locis, and that in some places transitur vado, is passed by a ford. Geneva est extremum oppidum Allobrogum. Geneva is the furthest town of the Allobroges, que proximum finibus Helvetiorum, and nearest to the borders of the Helveti. Ex eo oppido, from that town, pons pertinet, a bridge reaches ad Helvetius, to the Helveti. Existimabant sese, they did think themselves well persuasuros Allobrogibus, either about to persuade the Allobroges, quod viderentur nondum bono animo in Romanum populum, who did not seem yet with good mind towards the Roman populace, well coacturos vi, or about to force by violence, ut paterentur, that they should allow eos them ire to go per suos fines, through their borders. Omnibus rebus comparatis ad profectionem, all things being prepared to their departure, dicunt diem, they appoint a day, qua die, in which day, omnes conveniant ad ripam Rodani, all may assemble at the bank of the Rhone. Is dies erat ante quintum, this day was before the 5th diem day calendarum aprilis, of the calends of April. Lucio Pisone, Aulo Gabinio consulibus, Lucius Piso and Aulus Gabinius being consuls. Cum id nuntiatum esset Caesari, when that had been told to Caesar, eos conari facere iter per nostram provinciam, to them to try to make a journey through our province, maturat proficiscia burbe, he hurries to depart from the city, et contendit in ulteriorem Galliam, and he strains, and he marches into further Gaul, itineribus, by journeys, quam maximis potest, the greatest he can, et pervenit ad Genuam, and he arrives at Geneva. Imperat, he orders, toti provinciae quam maxim numerum militum, to the whole province, to furnish as great a number of soldiers. Una legio rat omnino in ulteriore Gallia. One legion was in all of further Gaul. Jubet pontem, he orders the bridge, qui erat ad Genuam, which was at Geneva, rescindi, to be cut down. Ubi Helveti facti sunt certiores de adventu eius, when the Helveti were made more certain of the arrival of him, mittunt nobilissimos civitatis legatos ad eum, they sent the noblest of the state ambassadors to him, quius legationis numeius et veradoctius obtinebant principem locum, of which embassy Numeus and Veradoctius did hold the chief place. Qui dicerent esse sibi in animo, that they should say to themselves in mind, sine ullo maleficio facere iter per provinciam, that they without any trouble to make a journey through the province, propteria quod haberent nullum aliud iter, because they did not have any other way. Rogare, to ask, ut liciat sibi, that it may be lawful to themselves facere id voluntate eus, to do that by the permission of him. Caesar, Caesar, quod tenebat memoria, because he did hold in memory Lucium Cassium consulem occisum, Lucius Cassius the consul being killed, que exercitum eius pulsum ab Helvetius, and the army of him, driven out by the Helveti, et mistum sub jugum, and sent under the yoke of subjugation, putabat non concedendum, did think it not to be conceded, neque existimabat homines inimico animo, nor did he think that men with unfriendly mind, facultate teneris faciundi, liberty of journey to be made per provinciam data, to the province being given, temperaturos ab injuria et maleficio, about to refrain from injury and mischief. Tamen, ut spatium possit intercedere, however, that as time might be able to intervene, dum milites, while the soldiers, quos imperaverat, whom he had ordered up, convenirent might assemble, respondit, he replied, se subturum diem ad deliberandum, himself to take a day to think about it, si velent quid reverterentur, if they did want anything they might return ad idus aprilis, at the Ides of April. Interior, meanwhile, legione, with that legion, quam habebat cum se, which he did have with himself, que militibus, and with the soldiers, qui convenerant ex provincia, who had assembled from out of the province, perducit murum, he leads along, he builds a wall, in altitudinem sedecim pedum, a height of 16 feet, que fossam a lacu Lemano, and a trench from the lake Lemanus, quem flumen Rhodonum influit, from which the river Rhone flows into, ad montem Juram, to the mountain Jura, qui dividit fine sequanorum ab Helvetis, which divides the borders of the Sequani from the Helveti, decem et novem milia passum, 19,000 paces. E opere perfecto, that work being completed, disponit praesidia, he arranges garrisons, communit castella, he fortifies castles, quo possit prohibere facilius, that he might be able to prevent more easily, si conarentur transire, if they should endeavor to pass over, se invito, himself being unwilling. Ubi ea dies venit, when that day came, quam constiturat cum legatis, which he had appointed with the ambassadors, et legati reverterunt ad eum, and the ambassadors returned to him. Negat, he denies se himself, morre et exemplo Romani populi, by custom and example of the Roman people, possedare iter per provinciam ulli, to be able to give a journey through the province to any. Et ostendit prohibiturum, and he shows himself about to prohibit. Si conentur, if they attempt, facere vim, to make violence. Helveti dejecti, the Helveti dejected, spare, from that hope, alii navibus junctis, others, ships being joined, que cum pluribus ratibus factis, and a great many rafts being made, ali vadis Rodani, others by fords of the Rhone, qua minima altitudo flumini serat, where least depth of the river was, non nunquam interdiu, sometimes in daytime, saepius noctu, more often at night, conati si possent, having tried if they were able, per rompere, to break through, repulsi munitione operis, repulsed by the fortification of the work, et concursu, and by the encounter, et telis, and the weapons militum of the soldiers, destiterunt hoc conatu, they stopped, they desisted from this endeavor. Una via, one way, per sequanos, through the sequani, relinquebatur, was left. Qua, by which sequanis invitis, the sequani being invitis, being unwilling, poterant non ire, propter angustias. They were not able to go that way because of the narrowness of the road. Cum possint non persuadere is sua sponte. When they were not able to persuade them by their own accord, mittunt legatos. They send ambassadors ad Dumnorigem Aedum to Dumnorix the Aeduan, ut deprecatore, that he, being intercessor, impetrarent hoc a sequenis. He might obtain this from the sequeni. Dumnorix poterat plurimum apud sequenos. Dumnorix was able, he had great influence with the sequeni, gratia et largitione, by favour and by largesse, et erat amicus Helvetis, and was a friend of the Helveti, quod duxerat in matrimonium filiam Orgetorigis ex ea civitate, because he had led into marriage the daughter of Orgetorix from that state, et adductus cupiditate regni, and induced by a desire for power, studebat novis rebus, he did study for new things, et volebat habere quam plurimas civitates obstrictas sua beneficio sibi, and did want to have very many states bound to his benefit, by his benefit to himself, sua beneficio sibi. Itaque, therefore, suscipit rem, he undertakes the matter, et impetrat a sequenis, and he obtains from the sequeni, ut patiantur Helvetius ire per suos fines, that they may allow the Helveti to go through their borders, que perficit uti dent obsides intercesse, and he effects the matter that they may give hostages between themselves. Sequeni, the sequeni, ne prohibeant Helvetius itinere, that they may prohibit, that may they not prohibit, in other words, the Helveti from the journey. Helveti, the Helveti, ut transeant sine maleficio et injuria, that they may pass without mischief and injury. Nuntiatur Caesari, esse Helvetis in animo facere per agrum sequanorum et aeduorum in fines santonum. It is announced to Caesar to be to the Helveti in mind to make the journey through the land of the Sequeni and of the Aedui into the borders of the Santones, qui absunt non longe a finibus Tolosatium, who are distant not far from the borders of Tolosates, quae civitas est in provincia, which state is in the province. Si id fieret, if that should be done, intelligebat, he did understand, futurum, it's about to be cum magno periculo provinciae, with great danger of the province, ut haberet bellicosos homines, that it should have warlike men, inimicos Romani populi, enemies of the Roman people, finitimos locis patentibus, bordering to places open, et maxime frumentaris, and chiefly abounding in wheat. Ob eas causas, on account of those reasons, praefecit Titium Labienum legatum, he set over Titus Labienus, lieutenant, a munitioni, to that fortification quam fecerat, which he had made. Ipse, he himself, contendit in Italiam, magnis itineribus, he hurried into Italy by great journeys, que ibi conscribit, and there he levies duas legiones, 2 legions, et educit ex hibernis 3, and he leads out of winter quarters 3, quae hiemabant circum Aquileam, who were wintering around Aquileia, et qua iter erat proximum inciteriorem Galliam per Alpes, and by which journey was the closest to hither Gaul through the Alps. Contendit, he hurries, ire, to go, cum his quinque legionibus, with these 5 legions. Ibi there centrones et Garrocoli, the centrones and Garrocoli, et Caturiges, and the Caturiges, superioribus locis occupatis, the higher places being occupied, conantur prohibere exercitum itinere. They tried to stop the army from its journey. His pulsis, these being routed, clom pluribus predis, in several skirmishes, pervenit ab Ocolo. He arrived from Ocolo, quod est extremum Citerioris provinciae, which is the extreme town of the hither province of Gaul. In fines Vocontiorum ulterioris provinciae, into the borders of the Voconti of the further province, septimo die, in the 7th day. Inde, from there, in fines Allobrogum, into the borders of the Allobroges, ducit exercitum ab Allobrogibus in Segusianus. He leads the army from the Allobroges into the Segusiani. He sunt primi extra provincia trans Rodanum. These are the first who are outside the province, beyond the river Rhone. Helvetiam transduxerat suas copias. The Helveti already had led over their forces per angustias, through the narrow passages, et fines sequanorum, and the borders of the Sequani, et pervenerant in fines Aeduorum, and had arrived into the borders of the Aedui, que popula bantur agroseorum, and they did lay waste the lands of them. Aedui, cum possent non defendere se, the Aedui, when they were able not to defend themselves, que sua abhis, and their own effects from these, mittunt legatos ad Caesarem rogatum auxilium. They send ambassadors to Caesar asking for assistance. Se omni tempore, themselves in all time, meritos esse ite de Romano populo, have deserved so of the Roman people, ut pene conspectu nostri exercitus, that almost in sight of our army, agri deburrint non vastari, their lands ought not to be laid waste, liberi eorum abduci in servitute, their children to be led away into slavery, oppida expugnari, the towns taken by storm. Eodem tempore, in the same time, quo Aedui, to which the Aedui, ambarri quoque, also the ambarri, necessari et consanguini Aedurum, the friends and kinsmen of the Aedui, faciunt Caesarem certiorem. They make Caesar more certain, they inform Caesar. Se, themselves, agris depopulatis, the lands being depopulated, non facile prohibere vim hostium ab oppidis, not easy to prohibit the violence of the enemies from the towns. Item allobroges, likewise the allobroges, qui habebant vicos, que possessiones trans Rodanum, who did have villages and possessions beyond the Rhone, recipiunt se fuga ad Caesarem, betake themselves in flight to Caesar, et demonstrant, and show, nihil reliqui esse sibi, nothing remaining of their property to be to themselves, praeter solum agri, except for the soil of the land. Ad ductus quibus rebus, induced by which things, Caesar statuit, Caesar decided, non expectandum sibi, not to be waited to himself, that he shouldn't wait, dum, until omnibus fortunis sociorum consumtis, all the fortunes of the allies being used up, Helveti pervenirent in Santones. The Helveti should arrive into the Santones. Arrar est flumen. The Arrar, that's the river Saon, is a river, quod influit in Rhodonum incredibili lenitate. It flows into the Rhone with incredible smoothness. Per fines Aeduorum et Sequanorum, through the borders of the Aedui and the Sequi. Ita, ut possit non judicari oculis, so that it may not be able to be judged by the eyes, in utram partem fluat, in which direction it flows. Helveti transibant id, the Helveti did pass over that, ratibus ac lintribus junctis, the rafts and boats being joined. Ubi Caesar factus est certior per exploratores, when Caesar was made more certain by scouts, Helvetius iam transduxisse id flumen tres partes copiarum, the Helveti already had led over that river 3 parts of their army, vero quartam partem esse reliquam, but the 4th part was remaining, citra flumen Ararim, on this side of the river Arar, de tertia vigilia, from the 3rd watch, that's midnight, profectus, having set out, e castris, from the camps, cum tribus legionibus, with 3 legions, pervenit ad eam partem, he arrives to that part, quae non dum transierat flumen, which had not yet passed across the river. Aggressus eius impeditos et inopinantes, having attacked them, encumbered and unaware, concidit magnam partem eorum, he cut up a great part of them. Reliqui, the rest, mandarunt sese fugae, committed themselves to running away. Atque abdiderunt in proximas silvas, and hid themselves in the nearest forests. Is pagus appellabatur Tigurinus. That district was called the Tigurine, nam omnis Helvetia civitas divis est in quatur pagos, because all of the Helvetian state has been divided into 4 districts. Hic unus pagus, this one district, cum exissit, when it had gone out, domo, from home, memoria nostrorum patrum, in the memory of our fathers, interfecerat Lucium Cassium consulem, had slain Lucius Cassius the consul. It miserat exercitum eos sub jugum, and had put the army of him under the yoke of submission. Ita sive casu, thus whether by chance, sive consilio immortalium deorum, or whether by the advice of the immortal gods, pars Helvetiae civitatis, the part of the Helvetian state, quae intolerat insignem calamitatem Romano populo, which had brought on a remarkable calamity to the Roman people, ea princeps, that, firstly, persolvit poenas, paid penalties, in qua re, in which matter, Caesar ultus est non solum publicas, Caesar's avenged not only public, sed etiam privatas injurias, but also private injuries. Quod Tigurini interfecerant Lucium Pisonem legatum, because the Tigurini had slain Lucius Piso, the lieutenant, avum Lucii Pisonis socri eius, the grandfather of Lucius Piso, father-in-law of him, that is, Caesar's father-in-law, eodem proilio, in the same battle, quo Cassium, in which they killed Cassius. Hoc proilio facto, this battle being made, ut possit consequi reliquas copias Helvetiorum, that he might be able to reach the remaining forces of the Helveti, curat pontem faciendum in Arare. He takes care that a bridge be made in Arar, at quita transducit exercitum, and so leads over the army. Helveti, commoti repentino adventu eius. The Helveti, disturbed by the sudden arrival of him, cum intelligerent illum fecisse uno die id, because they did understand him to have done in one day that quod ipsi confecerant, which they themselves had done agerime, hardly, viginti diebus in 20 days, ut transirent flumen, that they might pass over the river. Mittunt legatos ad eum, they send ambassadors to him, cuius legationis divico fuit princeps, of which embassy Divico was the chief, qui furat, who had been dux Helvetiorum, the leader of the Helveti, Cassiano Bello, in the Cassian War. Is ita egit cum Caesare, he thus treated with Caesar. Si Romanus populus faceret pacem cum Helvetis, if the Roman people would make peace with the Helveti, Helvetios ituros, the Helveti about to go, would go, in eam partem, into that part, atque futuros ibi, and about to be there, ubi Caesar constituisset, where Caesar might have appointed, atque voluisset, and might have wanted them esse to be. Sin perseveraret persequi bello, but if he should persevere to carry on with war, reminisceretur veteris incommodi populi Romani, he should remember the old inconvenience of the Roman people, et pristinae virtutis Helvetiorum, and the ancient valor of the Helvetians, quod adortus essit, because he had assaulted improviso, unexpectedly, unum pagum, one district, unum pagum, cum he, when those qui transissent flumen, who had passed across the river, passent non ferre, were not able to bring auxilium, aid, suis, to their men. Triburet, he should assign ne aut magnopere suae virtuti, not either greatly to his valor, ob eam rem, on account of that thing, aut despiceret ipsos, or should despise themselves. Se ite didicisse, themselves so to have learned, as suis patribus, quae maioribus, from their fathers and ancestors, ut contenderent magis virtute, that they should fight more by valor, quam niterentur dolo, than that they should strive by trickery, aut insidiis, or with ambushes, quare committeret ne, wherefore he should not commit, ut is locus, that place, ubi constituissent, where they had stood, caperet nomen, exclamitate Romani populi, should take a name from the calamity of the Roman people, et internecione exercitus, and the destruction of the army, ac proderet memoriam, and should deliver or hand down the memory of it. Caesar respondit ita his. Caesar answered thus to these words: Eo minus dubitationis dare sibi, therefore less of doubt to be given to himself, quod teneret eas res memoria, because he did hold those things in memory, quas Helveti legati cum memorassent, which the Helveti ambassadors had mentioned, atque ferre eo gravius, and to bear by that more heavily, quo accidissent, by which they had befallen, minus merito Romani populi, less by the merit of the Roman people, qui si fuisset conscius, which if it had been conscious sibi to itself aliquis injuriae of some injury, fuisse non difficile cavere, to not have been difficult to be careful, sed deceptum eo, but being deceived in this, quod, because, neque intelligerent, neither did it understand, commissum, asse, a fault committed by itself, quare timeret, wherefore it should fear, neque putarent timendum sine causa, nor did it think to be feared without reason, quod si velit oblivisci veteris contumeliae, But if he did decide to forget the ancient insult, num etiam possit deponere memoriam recentium injuriarum, whether also he would be able to lay down the memory of fresh injuries, quod that eo invito he, being unwilling, tentassent iter per provinciam per vim, he had attempted a journey through the province by violence, quod vexassent aeduos, quod ambarros, and had harassed the Aedui, and that the Amberi, quod allobroges, that the allobroges, quod gloria rentur tam insolenter sua victoria, that they did boast so instantly of their victory, quae quod admirarentur se tulis injurias impune, that they did wonder himself to have borne the injuries with impunity, tam diu, such a long time, pertinereod, to pertain to the same point. Enim, for immortales deos consuesse, the immortal gods to have been accustomed, quo homines doliant gravius, in order that men may grieve more heavily, ex commutatione rerum, from the change of things, quos velint ulcisci, whom they wish to punish, pro scelereorum, for the wickedness of them, interdum, sometimes, concedere secundiores res, they grant the more prosperous things, his, to these, it diutuniorem impunitatem, and more lasting impunity. Cum sint, whence those things are, ita, thus, tamen, si obsides dentur, yet if hostages may be given, sibi, to himself, ab iis, by them, uti intelligat, facturos that he may understand them about to do, quae policiantur, which they promise, et si satisfaciant aeduis de injuries, and if they may satisfy to the aedui concerning the injuries, quas intolerant, which they have brought on ipsis, to themselves, quae sociis eorum, and to their allies. Item, likewise, si allobrogibus, if to the allobroges, se esse, himself to be facturum pacem cum is, about to make peace with them. Dibico respondit. Helvetios institutos esse ita a maioribus, the veti, to have been instructed so by their ancestors. Uti, that consueverint accipere, they have been accustomed to receive, non dare, not to give, obsides, hostages. Romanum populum esse testem eius rei, the Roman people to be witness of that thing. Hoc responso dato, this answer being given, discessit, he departed. And that's the end of the 14th little chapter of Book 1 of De Bello Gallico, read in the Hamiltonian method. Let me know through your comments, whatever, if this is any use to you. If it is, I'll read some more of it later on. Bye.